Hi, everybody. I'm Bob Bowman, Editor-in-Chief of Supply Chain Brain, and I want to welcome you to this special presentation on Realize Order and Delivery Excellence through the Fulfillment and Final Mile Maturity Model presented by PeerBridge. There will be a question and answer session at the end of this presentation, by the way. Audience members are encouraged to submit their questions at any time during the presentation by clicking on that Q&A button at the bottom of your screen. Now, high customer expectations, continuing labor shortages, uncertain carrier capacity, and rising warehousing and shipping costs. It's becoming increasingly difficult to meet shippers' service expectations while increasing order throughput and preserving margins in a softening economy. So today, we're going to talk about how you can adopt new supply chain maturity models for fulfillment and final mile delivery so that service providers can scale order execution while delighting customers and stakeholders. With that, I want to introduce our speakers for today. Martin Hespeler is Vice President Americas with Microlistics and CargoWise Warehouse, part of the WiseTech Global Group. Martin has more than 30 years of experience solving complex retail, warehousing, and supply chain problems through improved processes and enterprise technology, with a strong focus on labor optimization, warehouse management, demand planning, promotions and price management, inventory optimization, merchandising, and mobility solutions. Mike Graves is Vice President of Product Management with PeerBridge, also WiseTech Global Group. He has 25 years of experience in leadership, technical sales, and solution architecture for logistics and supply chain software. Mike leads the analysis, specifications, design, and development of PeerBridge's TransStream enterprise parcel shipping software. So with that, I want to turn over the presentation to Mike Graves. Mike, take it away.
Thanks, Bob. In the aftermath of the pandemic, businesses are still dealing with supply chain shortages, labor pool reduction, inflation, and growing recessionary fears. E-commerce growth peaked during the pandemic, as we all experienced, but it's come down slightly from the peaks, but continues to grow as a percentage of total retail sales. Martin, how is that affecting the warehouse side of fulfillment?
Well, thanks, Mike. Sure. What we see on the warehouse side is that, the e-commerce that we saw so much during the pandemic, put a large amount of pressure on the 3PLs and 4PLs in our industry to adopt to multi and omni-channel fulfillment models. That coupled with the requirement when you have e-commerce to manage reverse logistics and returns is a complex environment for these companies that have never had to do these things before. One of the other things that we see too is finding the right resource balance, with market demands versus resourcing availability, and the challenges of trying to smooth that out in an already fluctuating market. We also have, coupled with that, the inflation, which is pushing costs to serve, and it's eroding the margins for these service providers. You have higher inventory carrying costs in the 1PLs as well. We see that as well there. And so it is quite a bit different than it was before. Meeting the delivery promises while preserving margins is also layered on top of that, which we see as a big impact to them. And we see that very often when they, release products to different carriers and have relationships with different carriers, Mike, as you know.
Yeah, thanks, Martin. In the shipping space, we can continue to see higher customer expectations. Those have now been set, right? So that's leading to smaller, more frequent deliveries, often same day, and resulting in higher cost per pound and higher cost per mile, while adding additional complexity and pressure on operations. On the carrier side, we still face capacity uncertainty, restricted volumes, and increasing surcharges as carriers look to optimize revenues and margins. Lots of change in the industry. For example, FedEx recently discontinued same-day city services and Sunday delivery, while we hear in the news about UPS facing a strike And the Postal Service continues to increase pricing as it looks for sound financial footing. So no one is free from the increased risk and costs as carriers, shippers, and consumers all feel the effects. All right, in the, excuse me. So the existing maturity models have traditionally focused on enterprise growth. The e-commerce maturity model assesses the growth and development of online businesses, consists of stages ranging from basic online presence to advanced strategies like personalization, omni-channel integration. Model helps organizations evaluate the progress and identify areas for improvement in the ever-evolving digital marketplace. Gartner's taken that a little further into the logistics maturity model, which is a framework that evaluates the advancement of logistics operations within an organization. It defines stages from basic processes to optimize supply chain networks. And this model assists companies in assessing their logistics capabilities and guiding them through achieving higher levels of efficiency, integration, and customer satisfaction. Martin, you must be familiar with the Zebra model in the warehouse maturity model.
Yeah, Mike, we have a little bit of exposure to that. Thank you. What we see, in the Zebra warehouse maturity model is, that you look at initially the existing situation and you try to manage that and identify any of the low-hanging fruit for modification of those practices or making changes to those. Embarking on that process, we then look at the avenues of improvement from workflows to actual physical changes at the warehouse level. Zebra asked the question if there might be technologies that can assist with this shift in warehousing. Well, the Zebra warehouse maturity model is the framework for assessing the maturity of the warehouse and those operations. It defines 5 stages from basic operations to fully optimized data-driven warehouses. That model helps organizations evaluate their current state, identify areas of improvement, and develop strategies for achieving higher levels of efficiency and productivity in their warehouses. But it's focused purely on their technologies, which can be limiting to the full potential.
Yeah, thanks, Martin. The fulfillment and final mile maturity model that we're presenting today attempts to consolidate the other models, not replace those. It's meant to be complementary, but it emphasizes the need to integrate and communicate across all of your enterprise functions, your partners and your customers, in order to reduce friction that can come up as individual functions or departments look to optimize without considering the implications to the other areas. We'll cover the fulfillment and final mile maturity model in detail throughout the presentation. Martin, what can a maturity model like this mean to our customers' businesses?
Well, what really happens is that they begin to look at managing the right types of inventory for our customers, such as, examples would include, heavy machinery versus small e-commerce items versus pallet in, pallet out. Our operations in the warehousing space can't be everything to everybody. So then we begin to, place products within the 4 walls of the warehouse in areas supporting the types of products, the velocity types, the seasonalities, as an example. You want to pick certain products in a timely manner as associated with the SLAs of our customers or our customer's customer. To get the proper packaging also can mean, tremendous amounts of improvement and instructions in support of our customers to customers. There can be tremendous efficiencies there. We look at the perfect order predictability, which really is the right product in the right place at the right time. We look at the right packaging, and then we look at the right carrier service, as with the right delivery experience. And then, of course, the proper returning processes. The opportunity for the businesses responsibly grow and expansion, faster speed to benefit and increased ROI, and drive continuous improvement throughout the warehouse.
Yeah, thanks, Martin. That makes a lot of sense. And as we go throughout the process, really, it's not intended to be a rigid structure. It's very fluid. Different parts of the organization can be in different stages, and some departments may have different functions within that department, within different stages. And as the environment changes, you could actually, slip backwards and forwards, depending on the timing and the opportunity. Our philosophy is about incremental change and continuous improvement at its core, allowing companies to evolve and grow to meet market opportunity.
Right. Yeah, we see that too. Here on this slide, it's really pretty clear what we see. We look at some primary buckets that we need to focus on and what's going on, right? And what we have is, can your people and places and processes and platforms support this evolution that we're going through right now? We want to really take a look at people first, and tribal knowledge has left the warehouse or is leaving for many reasons, retirements, etc. Now we need to find ways to best utilize the transient and temporary or new staff in movement throughout the learning curve as quickly as possible. Then the challenge becomes keeping them through making the job less frustrating, and incentives such as benefits, so on, right? And then, we got to make sure that when we have places that now the space is not wasted, and that we pay the lowest price for the space, and we have a high occupancy rate, that nothing goes to waste. In the processes, we need to squeeze lost and rework time out of the process for simpler, repeatable processes which are scalable. We don't want to fall into the old habits which cost the operation greatly and insert it into the supply chain, increase cost there, not push cost out. We also look at platforms today have evolved so much from what they were several years back. Today it's very easy access for some companies where it was unreachable prior. And we have companies that offer microservices. These are transaction-based software solutions. You only pay for them as you're using them. The cost increases as your business grows and you have visibility across the enterprise. We now know that, what is happening real time within the four walls and what is about to happen versus just reacting. We can have a strategy and a plan in advance. When we start looking at this with the fulfillment and final mile maturity can be applied to responsibly scaling the warehouse and shipping through uncertainty through overextending staff, space, and capital.
Yeah, good point, Martin. The fulfillment and final mile maturity model introduces a new framework for assessing the advancement of the fulfillment operations. It consists of 5 stages, starting from siloed and manual processes to advanced levels of automation, collaboration, and optimization. The model emphasizes integration, standardization, data sharing, configurable business rules, and the use of technologies like wearables, robotics, artificial intelligence to achieve continuous improvement and global fulfillment capabilities. PureBridge has been working to align these maturity models, as we introduced in the previous slide, with a focus on customer delivery in the final mile. We did a previous webinar on the high-level strategies a few months ago. That webinar is available on the purebridge.com website. Today, we're including fulfillment with our WMS partner, and we'll be providing a bit more tactical ideas. We'll go deeper into the planning, warehouse, and shipping operations while covering more tactical operational tips. And a reminder, when you represent something like this, it's not set in stone. It's going to be very fluid. And as you might guess, many of the customers that reach out to us are initially engaged in this stage 2 or stage 3 phase and remain engaged as they grow through the later stages. Quickly, the stages of the fulfillment and final mile maturity model, as we define them, are react and act. This is your siloed and autonomous operation stage. Stage 2, you're starting to anticipate and standardize processes. You're looking for integration and greater efficiency. As you mature into stage 3, you're now in the connect and automate stage, where you're perfecting within your operational walls or the perimeter of your organization. In stage 4, this is where you're really focused on collaborate and expand. You're going beyond your warehouse walls and looking for that extended enterprise. And then in stage 5, you're in the orchestrate and optimize. This is where you really get the opportunity to leverage your competitive advantage to drive innovation and continuous improvement. So let's take a look at each stage a bit more detail and dig into some of the strategies and tactics. So throughout the presentation, we'll use this 3x3 grid format. Across the top, we have the situation and indicators. This will help you identify what stage you're in. This is not comprehensive, so it is just intended to be a bit of a guide. We do provide some strategies and tactics to help get you to the next stage, and then some of the metrics and results. What are the KPIs that you should be paying attention to drive results here? Keeping in mind that different organizations will have different KPIs and what's really important to them. Down the left-hand side, we have the spreadsheet and stopwatch icon. This represents the first row, and that's the planning and optimization piece. The next row down is your building and boxes icon. That represents the warehouse floor. And in the last row, we have the dock and truck icon, which represents the shipping dock. So as mentioned, stage one is the react and act stage. This is the siloed autonomous operation. This might be referred to as multiple dysfunction by the Association for Supply Chain Management. It's also generally your startup phase. You'll recognize this with a lot of siloed autonomous operations, little documented processes. You're managing through people and exceptions, and there's little information exchanged across the organization. So some of the strategies and tactics are starting to identify where things are breaking down and digitize those specific functions. Start to improve some of your key processes and focus on some of the low-hanging fruit. And some of the KPIs here is really looking at things like order speed and errors, faster, more accurate fulfillment. So, Martin, what do you see in the warehouse here?
Yeah, well, for that second row, when we first take a look at it, we see bottlenecks in the warehouse, and that would seem to be like things where, there's traffic in a particular aisle that consistently occurs, or there's backup at the packing station that causes disruption and room for errors, right? The packing station being backed up doesn't get packages out the door at the right time, and usually, you miss your fulfillment requirements. When we start looking at order management systems, which are not integrated to WMSs for prioritization and SLA management, it will also have a major impact on error rates. So if people aren't packing in advance of trucks showing up in a timely manner, and there isn't a really formalized, structure around that creates tremendous amount of error rates that we see and waste. If you couple these with the manual order fulfillment process, the issues become exacerbated and affect multiple areas within the warehouse, and not even include the staff. The staff gets frustrated not being able to go and meet their goals as individual warehouse contributors. So what happens then is that we've now got to take a look at the strategy and what tactics we can employ to solve some of these problems. And what we look at is the new tactics such as, let's optimize our space. Let's use some advanced racking systems with specific pick faces supporting particular markets, verticals, or a customer type. Those types of things will streamline your activities in the facility, and they also reduce your labor cost. When you begin to implement better order fulfillment processes and integrate those with the workforce, they also feel satisfaction that the job is well done. They realize that and they know that. So, and then at the end, what's really important we see too, Mike, is that we've got to, even though we're making these little tactical changes here now, we also have to make sure that those changes are a positive impact to the organization. And that's when we begin to establish and evaluate a baseline of particular KPIs. Once they're in place, we can refine the process around those original results and drive better performance, resulting in greater efficiencies. What do you see on that carrier side?
Yeah, thanks, Martin. That's great. So typically at this stage, our shippers often will just have a single carrier. They're using, in many cases, carrier provided software with little to no integration to any kind of internal systems. That leads to very inefficient productivity. And as you mentioned, it's prone to errors, and that also drives higher shipping costs, whether that's from having to reship or selecting a more expensive service to meet a customer expectation because of internal delays. Customers in this space tend to primarily be doing domestic shipping, and they may or may not include some vendor drop ship at this stage. So some of the strategies and tactics are to start evaluating your current carrier performance and look to expand your carrier choices, and add regional and local carriers with a multi-carrier management system to allow for more effective rating and routing decisions. And for the KPIs, I think it's key to set a small number of KPIs to not overwhelm your staff. Stay focused on the key deliverables in that critical few KPIs. Some of those that you might consider would be things like your shipping cost per order, how many orders are dispatched per day, how many orders per resource are packed and shipped. And all of this should be taken from the perspective of the customer. So consistently meeting or exceeding those customer expectations is important throughout. So that will move us on to stage 2, where we're now in that anticipate and standardize phase. This is where we're looking to improve integration and drive efficiency. This is the semi-functional enterprise. So it's still mostly manual operations. There's a lot of focus here maybe on inventory reduction. You're often looking for your lowest cost suppliers. So the focus is trying to drive margin by shopping for the least cost supplier or carrier. You're starting to feel the pains of not having your processes documented. So you're in the early stages of process documentation and standardizing processes. You're probably looking to enhance your marketing and aligning the demand planning so that you make sure that you've got the right inventory on hand and things like that to coordinate with the marketing effort. But you may still see little internal coordination amongst the departments here. So how does that roll over into the warehouse, Martin?
Well, what we see there, thank you, is, as we highlight here in the second row, as the business grows and the demand increases, the expected occurs where more space and labor would be, required to meet that demand. Well, where space is concerned, if we think back to the previous slide, we've already made an investment in some proper racking systems, which now could be leveraged, and which can be determined by reviewing results from the earlier implementation. And some of those, basic KPIs, Mike, that you had talked about, coupled with the new labor processes that we introduced, such as wave and batch picking at that period of review, this will limit, the amount of overtime, space constraints, and it'll reduce having to augment your staff more than less, right? Now, the strategy has to be order accuracy at this point, as we get into that next box, because you've now got most of this worked out, but you now have to go and focus on the customer and the clients, right? Because your business has grown. Now you want to implement controls such as introducing, handheld terminals with the functionality to support the workflows, which will ensure less order fulfillment errors. Now, we identified those in stage 1, so now we're going to leverage that with some technology. In addition, to ensuring that there are processes around inventory availability and cycle counts to identify those shortages in inventory availability. Checks from vendors is guaranteed. It's not just a hope and last minute requirement. We need to make sure we have stock on hand. And, and this all starts to fall into place as we do these little steps along the way from stage 1 to stage 2. And then, we have to remember that our economy, is a global economy where so much of the supply chain is international and lead times can be extensive. So when we have some of these checks and balances in place, it allows us to, sort of forecast and plan ahead, which we weren't doing. We were reacting initially. And the activities will begin to show results around utilization of space, labor, minimize short ships and back orders as well. So, those things, by putting them in place in, this order, it really helps the business, solidify around some of that growth that they're experiencing. And I know that that plays right into the shipping side for you as well.
Yeah, absolutely. That growth is definitely felt in the shipping space at this point, right? So typically, we're still seeing maybe one or two locations at this point, but the shippers are starting to do multi-carrier, leveraging USPS, for example, for PO box delivery, APO, FPO, that type of thing. But we're still typically using disparate systems, often homegrown, or some entry-level commodity off-the-shelf type solutions with little or no integration. If there is, it might be like a batch import, export for orders, something like that. At this point, you may be doing some simple rate shopping, just looking for the least cost service, but not really looking at the most optimized service to meet the customer expectation. And at this point, you may start including some international shipping. Typically, this would be primarily North America, generally Canada. And these are single order shipments. There's no consolidation optimization at this point. So some of the strategies and tactics to deploy would be to continue to evaluate your current carriers and expand your carrier choices. Look for efficiencies and additional market coverage. And then, look for opportunities to group like shipments, et cetera, to batch print some of your labeling and reduce some of that manual entry and errors. Some of the KPIs here, again, are kind of subject to change, but your order to shipment time, how quickly are things getting through your warehouse and out the door? You're also starting to evaluate not just the cost per shipment, but your time in transit and how long it takes to get to your customers. And then really driving things like your a higher percentage of on-time deliveries within budget. All right, so that will move us to the next stage, which is the integrate and automate. So at this point, you're looking to connect and automate, perfecting the processes within your operational walls, right? So within the perimeter of your organization. The idea here is to have a fully integrated enterprise. You've got an increased focus on processes and your internal integration. You're probably outgrowing a lot of those entry commodity off-the-shelf systems, and you're upgrading systems to enterprise class ERP or an MRP. You're looking at distributed order management systems. And this is really where you start growing into your WMS and TMS solutions. This will drive improved internal communications and process documentation, including intranets. And this is also where we see organizations start looking for certifications around the standardization. So things like ISO 27001, SOC compliance, or other process certifications. And clearly, this is driving some of the enhanced warehousing, inventory, demand planning. We're fully integrated with the marketing at this point as well. So how is that affecting the warehouse, Martin?
Well, you highlighted it in the beginning very well, is that, when we have, these siloed, systems, it's really quite challenging. Even with the previous stage enhancements, we'll find that non-integrated solutions will not scale when and where needed to support, the growth of the business and the customer demands. Now they suddenly find themselves with thousands of SKUs, multiple channels supported, via multiple locations, and systems still, systems still have errors occur. And items as simple as picking the right box or the right bag for a particular shipment type or SKU is just not feasible with where they are in their evolution. So the integrated systems must be leveraged to ensure the best packaging for the SKU type or the customer type or the order type, and then that picking ensures the highest assurance of cost mitigation and customer satisfaction. We implement and track new KPIs now being introduced at this stage so that the modifications to the operations and the enhanced packaging options, can be measured and continually improved upon, as you're aware, Mike, right?
Yeah, definitely. And, agreed with the multi-location thing here. So, that's obviously going to have an impact on shipping. At this point, organizations likely have multiple domestic origin points, as well as starting to look at international origin points, right? They've got a growing number of users, kind of complex requirements around multimodal carrier mix that includes parcel, local carrier, LTL on the freight side, and may even include some of the crowdsourced carriers. Right? So you're likely to include international shipments and expansion into additional English-speaking countries at this point. So beyond Canada, you're looking at UK and Australia, typically the next logical ones. And we're starting to take that tribal knowledge and shift control. So at this point, that's being managed by your logistics managers and your systems, your TMS, for example. And this is where you've got the ability to configure your routing rules, your carrier instructions, your other business rules. And your metrics may mature a little bit into more of the time in transit, your carrier performance overall. This is where you start leveraging carrier scorecards and the like, if you don't already have those. Looking at the total cost, not just your base charges, but what are all those accessorials and surcharges, et cetera. And then, leveraging reconciliation or audit to make sure that you're getting the services that you paid for, and you can understand better the actual versus expected cost. And then organizations at this point are really looking for cost containment. As you're not really going to lower your cost typically, because you're continuing to grow your business, but you want to make sure that you've got the cost containment, your price per your shipment, price per mile, those types of things are coming down. And you've automated as much of the exception handling as possible so that you don't have a lot of manual exception processes, things like international freight or APO, FPO, for example. All right, so the next stage, we're at collaborate and elaborate. I'm sorry, we're going to orchestrate and optimize. So this is your chance to innovate at this stage, right? You're really looking to move beyond.
Yeah, we're at collaborate.
Oh, sorry.
We're at collaborate and
I thought
elaborate.
it was. Thank you.
Presentation, skip the slide. Go ahead.
So here we're collaborating and expanding. So we're going beyond the warehouse walls. Good catch. So this is the stage where you're really looking to become an extended enterprise. This is process integration across boundaries. This is a time where you're looking at a solid movement from just your low-cost suppliers and carriers to strategic partnerships with the focus on identifying your strategic alliances, your key suppliers, and 3PLs. You're focused here at this point of becoming a better vendor to your customers and a better customer to your suppliers and carriers. You'll see a lot of focus here on electronic communication across the organizations. That could include things like EDI, ASN, and API integration, facilitating ERP to ERP communication and that type of thing. And the key benefit here is really you're starting to look at supply chain cooperation versus supply chain competition.
Yeah, you're right about that. When we look at the second line there, collaboration and cooperation versus competition. When we look at like 2022 and we saw multiple supply chain disruptions, locally, nationally, and internationally, wherever possible, we recommend that you build into your operations some resiliency and redundancy wherever you can. This means looking beyond the four walls of the warehouse. We saw with sea, air, rail last year, we had disruptions everywhere. So this trickles out to the consumer and your customer's customer at any case. So wherever you can utilize the options for supply of goods and service partners, looking at, some of the things like, how consistent have you received goods from your suppliers? Are there some that are better and more consistent than others? But in any case, have a backup plan. This will ensure if there's a failure point in either of those two areas, there's a backup available, ensuring your customers will not notice a disruption, to what's going on in their orders. We like to think about assisting and advising suppliers and customers of inventory when there's decreased velocity or demand on a particular item. We look to shift and pivot from that. We always want to look at keeping a minimum inventory on hand needed to ensure fulfillment demands. However, but not to exceed the stock and let it stagnate over time. Space is money, and we really want to keep products moving consistently and flowing through the warehouse. Reducing the cost by consolidating shipments from suppliers to the warehouse also makes a big difference, as you talked about earlier, Mike. Consolidating shipments from abroad and things like that. Wherever you can do that with your suppliers, that's going to reduce your costs from a shipping perspective. I would then also really look at, starting to establish the next set of KPIs. We're building on all those ones from the previous slides, and now we're going to establish that next level to highlight those costs with inventory and the lack of turns within inventory in the warehouse. Continue to measure those error rates as well on the order fulfillment side and strive toward that perfect fulfillment model. And as you know, from our experiences, that integrated WMS to the, TMS that you provide, that is key to reducing error and bottlenecks, as we've already addressed.
Yeah, absolutely. So at this stage, our shippers are pretty complex, right? So now we've got omni-channel fulfillment. You've got a varied mix of diversified carriers across the globe. As you start getting into other markets, it's not just the big three like you see here in the US. You start expanding into the non-English speaking countries. So now you're dealing with different origin destinations and the complexity with customs and compliance and everything that comes with that, as well as managing drop ships and returns from the endless aisle. So that creates a lot of challenges with the reverse logistics. You may have multiple enterprise platforms, particularly if your strategy includes acquisitions in new markets and that type of thing. You're starting to leverage those microservices even more that you introduced earlier, Martin. And at this point, you start seeing some of the wearables, voice picks, and start leveraging those warehouse control systems. So some of the strategies and tactics here is, find those strategic partners that are going to help you expand your product mix to include that endless aisle, but become a better carrier partner. Really work with the carriers to make sure that you're providing the right mix of shipments that fit their equipment and their network and that type of thing, and not just constantly be beating them up over price, right? This really is about becoming a strategic partner. And manage to your carrier agreements, right? Make sure you're hitting your expected minimums and maximums and that type of thing. And cartonize to optimize your shipping spend. Make sure that you've got the right packaging with the right density for the type of shipping that you're doing, to help the carriers better utilize their equipment. And then some of the KPIs that you might be looking at here, again, it's looking at those expected versus actual costs, continuing to look at the carrier performance and your scorecards, but also your supplier scorecards at this point, and your vendor management. And then obviously, we're still looking at that predictable and perfect order fulfillment rate. All right, so now we're at orchestrate and optimize. And again, this is that area where you can really look to innovate. So you're taking those competitive advantages that you've already built, and you're taking those from kind of best in class to bleeding edge or leading edge technologies. You're able to leverage those existing systems, but take advantage of extended technologies like AI, machine learning, robotics, data science, augmented reality. These are all things that are creating a lot of value now. At this point, you're also looking at a lot of vendor managed inventory. Things like either owned by the vendor or continuing to be just managed by the vendor with automatic replenishment rates and things like that. Martin, how does that affect the warehouse?
Well, to your earlier point, at this point, we've made a lot of change and we've made a lot of advancements, right? So now at this point, in the warehouse, we've initiated all the major changes, which should be, performed to manage labor, optimize the space available, and to be able to scale to the demand, all while ensuring minimal error rates, right? And now the reinvestment can begin with the newer technologies. Like we've already seen, you'll see, a really good return on these improvements that you've made earlier. And you can leverage off those with the existing infrastructure. Phase 2 around the human capital, we look at amplifying the technology from handheld terminals to include hands-free technologies such as voice and vision picking. We also may be able to take, routine workflows away from the human capital, which are menial and cumbersome tasks where turnover is very high with a lack of job satisfaction, and replace those with warehouse, control systems and pick-to-light and robotics type systems. This will create the most effective environment for return on these investments, as, the machines also don't show up, sick. And there's no lack of productivity. It's extremely, continuous. And then it helps us to move products toward, the shipping component. And these last few automations around human capital investment and technologies make the speed to productivity curve with an associate also replacing temporary staff, quite impressive. Their learning curve is shortened dramatically. And this also translates to, that's on the shipping side too. With automation, there's no guesswork. It's all taken away.
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, so at this point, you're truly worldwide, right? You've got a global fulfillment network, inbound as well as outbound, and on the reverse logistics side of things, you've got an intermodal carrier network where you're potentially consolidating and drop shipping from international origin points. And that gives you the ability to start now looking at end-to-end supply chain visibility and monitoring, but also having that in transit inventory available to promise and things like that. So at this point, you are able to take advantage of some advanced technologies around dynamic planning and modeling. That includes some of the machine learning and optimization. And clearly some of the robotic and AI is adding a lot of value here in the shipping and warehouse systems at this point. So some of the strategies and tactics is, beyond just looking at the shipments that are leaving your organization, is really focused on that inbound. So, what is coming into the facilities? How can that be further optimized to reduce costs and some of the handling around bringing those items through the organization? And then the returns, how do you disposition those returns and get those, repurposed, reused, recycled, and whatever that is going to be. And then you're also starting to look now at things like domestic zone skipping and zone consolidation, your LTL optimization, if you haven't already done that here with milk runs and that type of advanced technology. Again, some of the key metrics are your delivery time, your predictive time in transit. So not just what does the carrier guarantee for your time in transit, what are your experiences on that route, on that lane with that carrier? and further fine tuning carrier scorecards to include some of that additional detail. And clearly, this is your opportunity to take all of those leveraged competitive advantages and delight your customers. Use order fulfillment and final mile to really set yourself apart from competition. All right, so with this slide, it's just kind of a nice tactical slide and a tactical roadmap for companies that want to evaluate where they're at. Clearly, we didn't hit everything on this one slide, but we put some of the important bullets in here. We filled it out with a lot of the tactics that we covered on the presentation, but you should make this your own. This will allow you to go in, either leverage what's here, or start from a blank sheet and lay something out similar, so you can create your own roadmap and vision. So that's it for the meat of our content today. Martin, can you sum up the maturity model and how our solutions can help drive customer value?
Yeah, sure, Mike. Appreciate that. Thank you very much. Well, when we get to this point, in the summary, we think of fulfillment, and when I always think of, from the warehouse, we receive product, we store product, we ship product. And, when we start to, ship product to meet customers' needs and expectations, it's pick, pack, parcel, and that's a key part of the order life cycle in this world today. So whether you start with a shipping solution or a WMS, the key really is, with this maturity model, just start. Don't continue to do what you've been doing, because, if you don't start, you're not going to make any advances, and you won't be able to service as many clients or make as much money. And, the beauty of these two products, that when we look at whichever one you start with, in the latter stages of the maturity model, you don't outgrow these. They're very scalable. They're very transferable. They're extremely powerful tools. Then you look at the integrated best-in-class WMS and TMS, and what are the benefits that they provide an organization, right? When, trying to manage the complete order life cycle, the reduction in error rates and speed to, delivery, and all those types of things that we talked about today. And if you wanted to take it up another level, you can also look at integrating your order management with the e-com through APIs and things like that. So from the time of the order by the customer to the time of delivery, all aspects of the order journey through the supply chain is actionable and visible, ensuring, customer satisfaction and, meeting your customers' expectations. Tools like, that you assist us with, Mike, and things like on the cartonization side, they reduce the time to pick and pack, and the cost of the pack, it meets the expectations, enhance the carrier experience greatly. Talks to also that, what you talked about, don't just look for the price with the carrier, make it workable for them. So if you're giving them the right size parcels and the right size bags, et cetera, it just makes a better partnership. While implementing and integrating, don't forget you should have enabled at this point some of those KPIs, and you should look at visibility tools for the boardroom, which can easily, mature and align with the stages, that we discussed today, with actionable insights all along your journey. That's what I see, in a summary for this. I'm sure you've got some thoughts as well, Mike.
Yeah, thanks, Martin. As we introduced earlier in this slides presentation, what we're focused on is really driving responsible growth and expansion. You mentioned it on your last slide. Just start somewhere, right? Start looking at the faster speed to benefit and your increased ROI, and that incremental continuous improvement. So leveraging the fulfillment and final mile maturity model allows you to implement scalable, flexible processes and systems to drive the improved accuracy and efficiency, maximizing space and resources while preserving margins and delighting your customers. The increased productivity and flexibility to adapt to market, business and operational threats as we experienced through the pandemic, as well as the opportunities and innovations that affords. and then making sure that you have the greater scalability and profitability to invest in and capitalize on that evolutionary growth, improvement, and maturity. All right, I think that brings us to the Q&A.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Mike. Thank you, Martin, for that excellent presentation. Boy, that was super detailed, taking our listeners through an incredible journey toward maturity, both in the warehouse and beyond. So thanks for that. It is now time for a few audience questions. Even as we answer these, audiences are encouraged to continue to submit their questions, and we will, of course, get to as many of them as we can, time permitting. Here's a question, and I'll just throw it out to whoever wants to take it. How can we leverage the latest technology, AI and machine learning, in order fulfillment, final mile deliveries? We did allude briefly to AI in this presentation, but I'm guessing this is that question. I would like you to go into a little bit more depth about that. What do you think? Perhaps Martin, you want to start on that, maybe?
Yeah, sure. I mean, what we're seeing companies do, and where we see the vision here with, AI and things like that, it just assists you greatly with decision making and making accurate decisions. And those decisions then translate to what occurs in the warehouse, when, at what time, and what's optimal, because that then moves downstream to Mike's area, which is the carrier component, right? As soon as we've made the right decisions to make goods available on and hand them over to Mike's side of the supply chain, which is all about the shipment and that final mile delivery, he then can act upon those. Right, Mike?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think some of the AI that you'll see coming will be a lot around that predictive stuff, right? It's like, what are we predicting is going to happen next? Predicting that you're going to have a shipment delay because of weather that's rolling across the Midwest, that type of thing. But also some of the data analytics and the data science there that's really looking at tips. Hey, you're doing a lot of shipping to zone 7, right? Under 5 pounds with FedEx. Have you thought about USPS? So those types of things will be coming in. And then under the planning and optimization tools is a lot of the what if analysis type things that can be supplemented with the AI machine learning as well.
Great, thank you for that. Question here, I think this one goes to Martin. What would be the impact on contract logistics warehousing?
No, that's a good question. The impact, I'm a little bit, that's quite a broad question, but the impact on, the warehousing space when it comes to contract logistics, we see that, again, you have to employ some of these technologies and micro strategies, to support that. There's a lot of, warehouse space now available, and it's on like a timeshare basis, right? And a contract basis. And they utilize space on very short windows of time, weekly, daily, for specific strategic goals within their, organizations. So, I think that, it all comes together at the end of the day. We've got product moving through the 4 walls, and, all of these players in this space have to adopt technologies and AI and things like that to make sure they're ahead of the curve, and they can actually help, that facility and that organization be successful.
Okay, thank you very much for that, Martin. We are unfortunately just about out of time. Time for just one final question. I'm going to direct it to Mike. Mike, what is the best way to determine your current age?
Yeah, thanks, Bob. Before I jump into the answer, let me thank you and the wonderful team at Supply Chain Brain for giving us the opportunity to speak today, along with Martin for helping in the presentation. I greatly appreciate it, Martin. We'd also like to thank all the attendees for your time today. Throughout the presentation today, we presented tactics and tools which you can use to identify your situation, needs, and metrics to drive success. We'll also be releasing some supporting content, including some ebooks and checklists to help you on your journey. as Martin mentioned, just start by breaking down the topics into departments and functional areas that provide your current competitive advantage, and look for low-hanging fruit. Drive some quick wins that will provide your ROI and the confidence to jumpstart your journey to success.
Thanks very much for that, Mike. And once again, Mike Grace, Mark Hespler, thank you for those great insights as well as your answers to those questions. I want to thank our audience as well for listening in and for your questions as well. Here's where you can access a complimentary evaluation on where you sit on the fulfillment and final mile maturity model. There is, you can visit peerbridge.com/resources. And if you're interested in evaluating your maturity stage, building a roadmap to evolve, you can contact these gentlemen and these companies for a complimentary consultation. So with that, once again, and by the way, that information will, of course, be provided to all attendees of this webinar after the presentation. With that, I want to once again thank our speakers for today, Martin and Mike, and our audience as well for your attendance. Everybody, have a great day, and thanks for being here.